matters at state level, particularly at governor races, but also actually in local legislative branches of the government in those states. Because what matters there is who's in pole position to actually count the votes and count which votes are worth counting in 2 years' time in the presidential election in 2024.
Yeah, and have we got indications that the Republicans, or at least those Trump elements, are going to question the results yet again and try and keep this narrative going?
Absolutely. So we have 300 candidates across the country who are election deniers, who actually disputed the result of the last election 2 years ago. 200 of those candidates have the backing of Trump. And we have people like Carrie Lake, who's running for governor of Arizona, saying that she won't commit to actually abide by the decision of the election because she wants to dispute it, because they have spread the idea that the electoral process is not working properly, and as a consequence, they will only declare it as being valid if they win. So we can expect, actually, tomorrow morning, many recounts, possibly legal challenges. Remember, of course, Trump had 63 different legal challenges against the result 2 years ago. And even then, even though 63 courts said that he had no claim, he still disputed the result of the election. So we may actually have a situation whereby the orderly transfer of power, which is the litmus test of any democracy or any stable government, isn't one we can guarantee, because we have people who will dispute the election and will sow doubts about the integrity of the election.
And therefore, are we taking this as an indication as to whether Trump will run for that presidency in 2 years' time and use this as his starting block? I mean, we're being told he's making an announcement on Tuesday.
I think it's almost certain that Trump will run, and he'll do it for two reasons. He wants to be first out of the block, so he's ahead of the field and he's declared his candidacy before Mike Pence or Mike Pompeo or Ron DeSantis can actually come out and declare that they're hand to run for the Republican Party nomination. But he's also doing it because he believes that if he's a declared candidate and therefore part of the process to be elected president in 2 years' time, that the Department of Justice will back off and not come after him. There are 6 different legal disputes, that legal investigations that Trump's subject to because of his various misdemeanors or alleged misdemeanors across the piece. And therefore, Trump will see that as a way of trying to avoid being brought to justice for those events.
And what about Biden? I mean, how much will this be a vote on his, as some would say, failing presidency? I mean, the Democrats, I understand, have adopted do no harm as the approach, i.e. putting Obama, even Clinton out there to try and rally the troops.
Yes, Biden is very unpopular. He's associated with the downturn in the economy. He's associated with the inflation and the high crime rates and the border issue, all of which are the Republican talking points for this election. And he's also seen as somewhat lackluster. And when you put him out in the campaign trail with Obama, that contrast is even more apparent. It's not clear, actually, that he will run. And if the Democrats get a drubbing, when he's 80 in 2 weeks' time, we may see that his wife persuades him that actually it's time to hang up his microphone and to leave the stump. Because although he was regarded as the only Democrat who could beat Trump in 2016, in 2020, it may well be the case that actually he's the only Democrat who Trump would beat in that race. So it may well be the case that the Democratic Party will persuade him that you stand aside and have a generational change and have someone like Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, step in and be the more charismatic and more energetic candidate for that race. So a lot hands on this election, not just in terms of actually what Trump does, but what Biden does as well.
All to play for then. Professor Dunn, thanks very much indeed, and we're expecting those results to come through early in the morning UK time. Plenty more analysis here on GB News tomorrow. Well, coming up, the so-called wonder drug treating breast cancer now to be made available on the NHS. Could it mean some women avoiding having to have a mastectomy? We'll speak to a teacher undergoing the treatment. First, latest news headlines with Rosie.
Good afternoon, 12:31. I'm Rosie, keeping you up to date. Rishi Sunak is considering raising state pensions and benefits in line with inflation. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor are also considering imposing up to £60 billion in tax rises and spending cuts in the autumn budget next week. Sir Gavin Williamson reportedly told a senior civil servant to slit your throat while he was Defence Secretary. The Guardian's reporting that Sir Gavin made the remarks in front of colleagues in a meeting and on another occasion told them to jump out of the window. Sir Gavin denies the new claims. Boris Johnson's asked MPs he's nominated for peerages to delay taking them so they don't trigger by-elections in their constituencies. Nadine Dorris and Alok Sharma are amongst those the Times are reporting to have been given the honours. The Conservatives are currently behind the Labour Party in most official opinion polls. The government's understood to be nearing a deal with France over the Channel migrant crisis. The agreement could see British immigration officers stationed in French control rooms, allowing them to coordinate beach searches for boats being launched into the water. It's believed the deal is worth around £80 million. Downing Street, however, have played down speculation, saying discussions are ongoing. 16 Just Stop Oil protesters have been arrested for blocking several junctions of the M25 on their second day of action on the motorway. Police were forced to halt traffic on the Dartford crossing for over an hour. It has now reopened. Met Police deployed specialist removal teams to deal with the demonstrators. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. It's GB News. Mark, will be back in...
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky. That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak.
Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
And welcome back to GB News Live. Now, despite the threat of that court action, the protesters bringing large parts of the M25 to a halt once again, the second day running. Police saying their actions in climbing the gantries over the main carriageways a criminally hazardous act. Well, 16 arrests have been made today, but the Just Stop Oil group saying they will continue with their actions and will not be intimidated, as they said, by changes in the law. Well, let's speak now to Laura Johnson, a spokesperson with Just Stop Oil. Laura, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'm just looking at the figures. 16 arrested today, 20 arrested yesterday, 8 people charged with conspiracy to cause a public nuisance. Are you thinking perhaps you are above the law?
No, not at all. What we are saying is the government is going to destroy our future and people are dying right now and we have to stop new oil.
And how does your protest actually stop that happening? Because clearly a lot of motorists are getting very frustrated with your actions, and indeed Essex Police saying that it's putting people at harm, particularly your own protesters.
Well, it's really unfortunate that we've got to this stage, but as I said, we're being lied to and we're being let down, and people they have every right to be angry. We are disrupting their day, but they need to start redirecting that anger at the government and realise that we are not the bad guys. We are calling the alarm.
Well, you are the bad guys in terms of disrupting the major orbital motorway for 2 days running when people are trying to get to hospital appointments, doctor's appointments, trying to get their children to school, trying to get to work. What good does it actually do?
Well, the past has shown us that civil disobedience, civil resistance against corrupt regimes or corrupt governments does actually work. We had 40-degree heat this year. We had birds falling out of the sky, train tracks buckled from the heat. We had wildfires. Over 1,000 people died from 40-degree heat in just 48 hours. What's going to happen next year? This is real now, and people are dying now. And people need to wake up and be angry at the government and not be angry with us.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. They're angry at you at the moment. They're not angry at the government. So is your protest movement actually failing in its main purpose?
Well, we are being talked about more, aren't we? I mean, how do you feel? Are you scared about the future? Do you feel like you're doing enough as a journalist to let your viewers know what's happening?
Well, I'm interviewing you at the moment on that very topic, so I think I'm doing my job at the moment, but I'm also challenging you because many people are getting a bit fed up with the action you're taking. And let me just read to you what the Chief Superintendent of Essex Police said this morning, and I hope you're listening to this. We've had to mobilise a significant amount of resources which should be tackling knife crime, helping investigate sexual and domestic offences and responding to burglaries. Instead, we're having to work hard to prevent criminal acts and respond as quickly as we can where they take place to ensure safety.
Well, I would say that's down to the government. The government are choosing to criminalise.
No. He's directing that at you as the protesters.
Well, I would say the police are there to serve and protect the people. And the biggest threat to humanity right now, and the biggest threat to people of this country, is the climate crisis. The fire service had their busiest day from the Blitz, and we only had 2 days of 40-degree heat. How many days will we have next year?
And what about those fire engines and emergency vehicles that you actually stop going along the Queen's Highway, even though you so-called have blue light lanes, which have failed on many occasions?
Well, again, this is a problem. We're on here and you want to talk about methods and these hypothetical scenarios with ambulances. People are dying right now.
Well, no, I'm sorry, Laura, it's not hypothetical. You are stopping these vehicles from travelling along the highway, whether it's motorways or main roads in London, including emergency vehicles. And the fire brigade, which you just mentioned, have said as much.
Well, the government have the power to stop this. It's only the government that can stop this. New oil licensing is a death threat to every person on this planet and every person in this country. Right. We've already had huge food shortages. They will get worse next year. Nobody's talking about it. It's not being given the proper attention it needs.
Forgive me, but they were talking about it in Sharm el-Sheikh yesterday with all the world leaders, including the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. But let me put this to you. The quote from Just Stop Oil was, "We won't be intimidated by changes to the law. But given that you've got 16 arrested today, 20 arrested yesterday, 8 charged with conspiracy, and now also a High Court injunction, which means you could be in contempt of court, it could be that many of you just get locked up."
Well, we are actually growing in numbers. More people are waking up and they're realising that the only way to change these corrupt systems is civil resistance against the government. And I think if you spent longer talking about the message and not the method, then people would be waking up faster. It's your job as well. Do you have a family that you care about?
Of course I do. And I'm talking to you about the method because that is what you are putting out there in the public arena, the way that you're acting, which is why, obviously, I'm talking to you at the moment. Can I just ask you, though, what happens next? Are you going to continue with this type of protest or do you develop other ways of direct action? What happens next?
What happens next depends on the government. If they say no to licensing new oil, then we will stop tomorrow.
OK, and what about liquefied natural gas, which is coming across the Atlantic, we're being told, from the United States? Is that in the same category as oil, as far as you're concerned?
Renewables are 9 times cheaper. It took 6 weeks to build the biggest solar farm in the UK, 6 weeks. These new oil licenses won't be coming in for the next 10 or 15 years. Renewables are 9 times cheaper. People are facing an energy bill that's £3,500. It could be £400. People are going to be dying in their homes again this winter because we don't insulate our homes, and instead we give huge tax subsidies to fossil fuels, and the government care more about keeping those industries rich rather than their own people. That's the truth. That's what we should be talking about. It's like, don't shoot the messenger, listen to the message.
OK, and we have indeed done that. Laura Johnson from Just Stop Oil, thanks for joining us here on GB News. And, of course, we'll welcome your appearance as we get more protests to discuss that particular topic. Don't forget to let us know what you think. GB views at GB News, and we'll reflect them, if they're suitable for public comment, a little later. Now, let's talk about something that the NHS England is offering to help people with a potentially life-saving drug to more patients suffering from a very aggressive type of breast cancer. Now, triple-negative tumours account for 15% of all breast cancer cases, but they're harder to treat and therefore result in poorer outcomes. Now, the new drug, pembrolizumab, given alongside chemotherapy, can help to shrink the cancers and stop them from spreading, and it could spare some women from having to undergo mastectomies, say the experts. Well, the triple-negative breast cancer is affecting around 8,000 patients a year currently and is more common amongst women under 40, also thought disproportionately affecting, Black and Afro-Caribbean women. So, already being used to give some women with incurable breast cancer more months of life. Now the NHS able to offer it to women with earlier tumours too, we're being told. Let's speak now to an NHS nurse, Lauren Seary, who has received the therapy herself a few years ago in a clinical trial. Lauren, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I hope I pronounced the drug correctly. It's quite a mouthful. But it's interesting in that it's actually a move away from, I guess, what is traditional chemotherapy to what's more of an immune therapy drug. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So I had pembrolizumab alongside traditional chemotherapy. So it can either be given alongside or as a standalone treatment. So I had that, and I also had additional treatment with pembrolizumab after I'd finished my chemotherapy as a kind of insurance policy, I suppose, for prevention against recurrence.
May I ask how you're doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm approaching my 5-year all clear. So that's a big milestone for me, which I plan to celebrate next year in Las Vegas. So
and why not?
On the card.
And why not? Well, that's great news. But this is important because the drug has been in use, but really for those who perhaps are in stage 4 and they've only got a few months of health left, and it's helped them. But this now is being put forward to help those women who may actually have curable cancer. Is that right?
That's correct. So I was diagnosed with early stage triple negative breast cancer when I was 31. And I was offered the opportunity to participate in this clinical trial to not only treat the primary cancer, but also to give me a better chance of avoiding recurrence in future. So, yeah, that was my experience of the drug.
Yeah, and the key also, it may prevent a lot of women having to undergo surgery and mastectomies as well.
That's correct. So my experience was that the drug shrunk my tumour very quickly, and I was able to have a lumpectomy, which is a much less invasive surgery. So I managed to keep my breast rather than having a mastectomy.
Now, it looks as if the NHS has signed the cheque, if you like, for this. And clearly, given the constrictions on the NHS at the moment with various spending and financial problems, this will pay for itself, do we think?
I can't really comment about that side of things because I'm not aware of the financials. But from what I've read in the release this morning, I think a pretty good deal has been struck between the drug company and the NHS to allow this treatment to be available quicker for more people.
Because clearly when people get ill and have to be looked after with acute problems, that is in itself very expensive for the health system. Of course, yeah. OK, well, Lauren, it's good to hear how effective it's been with you, and we hope that it's going to help many more women as well. Thanks very much indeed for joining us with your story and bringing us an uplifting tale. Thanks very much indeed. And, of course, we'll reflect more on that particular drug as it gets into the system in the months to come. Now, let's move on to the premiere of the Netflix series The Crown, set to take place this evening at the Royal Theatre in London. The 5th season being released tomorrow, and it has 10 episodes, but also fresh faces, the cast changing, with a new Lady Diana and a new Prince Charles, as he was. The new season, though, quite controversial. Many people watching it, and, of course, it is pretty influential too. Let's speak now to Royal Correspondent Nicholas Owen joining us. Nicholas, thank you for your time once more. You've lived the real thing, and some may say, well, that was dramatic enough in itself. Why actually go this extra way and add all these sort of storylines?
Well, I think it's perfectly legitimate to have a drama that concentrates now on the more up-to-date story. It would seem a bit illogical, wouldn't it, to bring it all the way from the very early days, right back in the 1930s when the Queen was very small, and then right the way through all the events that have happened, so many things. Princess Diana, my goodness me, yes, she dominated it so. Queen now to be played, I think, by Imelda Staunton, isn't she? And then somebody new playing Princess Diana. By all accounts, a very, very good portrayal of Diana, apart from all the other controversies. So yes. I'm looking forward to that. I think it's a legitimate thing to do. What one can argue endlessly about how accurate and historical it's actually got to be. It's entertainment. It's the way of the world. I'm very relaxed about it. I'll be watching.
Yeah, but however, the contentious issues, I mean, clearly a lot of people uneasy because it's so soon after the late Queen's death. And in particular, now King Charles on the throne, and of course the two boys, William and Harry as well. This particular series touches on some very, difficult instances for the two boys and Prince Charles as he was himself.
Yes, of course it does, and one understands that. But, when you think about it, the argument is made that for a lot of people, especially abroad, think of the United States, they're going to think that this is the real, true story all the way through. But let's be honest about this. Hollywood has been making films about Britain, and indeed we make them as well over here from time to time, which don't exactly show an exact portrait of the way life is, exact portrait of the way people are. Some are a bit more accurate than others, depends who you talk to, rather, doesn't it? But I don't think one should get too fussed about it. It is going to be a bit hard to watch for those who are very close to it. I'm sure there are members of the royal family who'd either rather not see it or feel offended by it. We know that various prime ministers, notably John Major and indeed Tony Blair, have said it's absolute rubbish. Well, again, okay, as long as nobody is libelled, which is always the test, isn't it? If there's a libel, that's a different matter, and that will lead to the courts and all sorts of things. But if we're spinning out a drama here, I think it's useful in one way. It does sort of demonstrate some of the complexities of family relationships. Yeah. After all, dysfunctional families do make good entertainment. I'm sorry to put it like that, but it is the real truth, isn't it? It is the truth.
And let's perhaps reflect that this particular period that this season 5 is looking at, I mean, we remember the Annus Horribilis. This was a particularly difficult time for the Queen.
Oh, indeed it was, yes. I think a tendency to sort of, in the light particularly of Her Majesty's passing, to look back and think that the reign was always a sort of golden glory all the way through. Of course, that wasn't true. Particularly the early 90s were very difficult for her. The fire at Windsor Castle and so many other things, lots of other things went wrong. And then the disintegration of the marriage of the then Prince Charles and Lady Diana, that was obviously an extremely painful and difficult time. time. My goodness, yes, it certainly was.
OK, well, look, stay with us, Nick, because we've got the King beginning a 2-day visit to Yorkshire, where he will actually unveil a statue of his late mother, Queen Elizabeth, as well as congratulate the UK's newest city. I'm just hoping we can bring... Yes, there are the pictures of everyone waiting patiently in Bradford for that particular event. We understand that he'll be visiting Morrison's head office in Bradford because of what they're doing with sustainable food, and also lots of young people there in Bradford. And then I think he'll be going to York tomorrow. Clearly, this is a new-look monarchy, but there's been much affection shown in these various visits to the King and Queen consort in these past weeks.
Oh, indeed there has. I think we made the point before, Mark. We talked on GB News before about the fact that right from the first moments, really, after the terrible sadness and the great shock, really, of the death of Queen Elizabeth. Now, Prince Charles, as he then was, had to deal with that. He immediately became king. But there was an immediate change in the way that he was reacting to the role that he now has, the thing that he has waited so very, very long for. Remember, he is the oldest person ever to become monarch. And he's a little bit younger than me as well, but there we go. But it is a new approach. He tends to be much more glad-handing with the crowds, getting out and talking to people. We're seeing a sort of new side to him, something he had to do very quickly and get into very quickly, and I think he's doing a terrific job of that. You can see the people all standing around there. There's always a great, wonderful nervousness when it comes to royalty, particularly everyone on their best behaviour, aren't they? All standing there. But they will find. The Queen was super, but she did tend to have a sort of fairly set way of just going up to people, speaking to them briefly, being moved on.
Yeah.
King Charles did it rather differently. His personality is coming out, and I agree, he's doing an absolutely terrific job. And any Netflix series and any other documentaries even that are a bit sort of antagonistic, it won't make the slightest difference to that. His popularity is absolutely assured, Mark.
OK, well, this, just to remind people, is Bradford City Hall in Centenary Square. I think we've got the Bradford Brass Band and the students of the Punjabi Roots Academy on standby for a musical reception there. And let's remind people, this is one of Britain's newest cities, so it's quite an event. But just to touch on what you were mentioning there, Nick, about him taking on the throne, one of the contentious storylines, of course, which John Major has attacked, was this suggestion that, Prince Charles was quite eager to get on the throne and perhaps wanted his mother out of the way a bit sooner than was known to the public, shall we say.
Well, certainly not seemly at all. And actually, frankly, well, let's be clear about it, Mark. I agree. I don't always agree with prime ministers, either serving or former, but I think they're right, or I think John Major was right to call this they're completely wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's just not likely to have happened at all. It's a dramatic storyline taken a little too far, I suggest. But let's all relax a bit. And I don't think I've actually yet met anybody who's seen the whole thing in terrific detail, heard about it. There may be some subtleties there. We just don't know. But I agree with that storyline is not. And there were some other earlier storylines that weren't so good either. But overall, the performances have been, I think, very interesting. And I think it's something that people will want to watch. And it will stir memories. Suddenly we are now coming up to date with things. Almost everybody now will remember an awful lot of the events. Anybody who's watching television, even if they were a small child at the time, say of the death of Princess Diana, a very, very sad occasion, they will say, oh, yes, I remember that time. I remember it. Oh, was it really like that? Oh, I don't think. No, probably not. Maybe yes. That's fine. Absolutely.
Yeah, and of course, then perhaps we may even see the new king in the final series. But let's just have a quick listen in to the Punjabi musicians, the drummers here of the Punjabi Roots Academy. Well, let's just update you that we are listening to the fantastic drumming and sound of the Punjabi Roots Academy here in Bradford at the City Hall in Centenary Square, with the Bradford Brass Band behind as well, giving musical accompaniment, awaiting the King and Queen Consort on their two-day visit to Yorkshire, Bradford, the UK's newest city. And there will be this reception, first of all, with young leaders of the city at the City Hall in Centenary Square, and then students and others meeting the King and Queen Consort. But we can see the civic dignitaries waiting there as well. I think Nick is still with us. Nick, who is ITN's royal correspondent. Nick, I suppose you remember well being penned back with all the photographers and such at these events, trying to get the shot as they arrived.
I remember it very well indeed. I tell you what, we didn't very often get music as quite as glorious as that. I absolutely love the idea, the combination of the brass band with the Punjabi drummers. Absolutely fantastic. Yes, I mean it does stir many memories of waiting around. They always say everything smells of fresh paint, of course, and all of that. And I'm sure we're outside at the moment, but as soon as King Charles goes inside, everything will be tidied up and look good. But it will be. It is a more relaxed atmosphere. This is what we were talking about earlier, wasn't it? It's just bringing the monarchy, I think, a little bit closer to the people, and that I think is a very, very good thing indeed. Well, there's some mayor-type person striding very purposefully away there, so I think we should be seeing the King pretty soon, King and the Queen. I don't go along with this Queen Consort thing. I just think of her as Queen Camilla. I think that's fine with me, incidentally. But of course, you see, some people would say that's not very accurate, Nicholas. But hey, come on, let's all relax. Let's all enjoy this stuff.
Yeah, I think I'm right in saying that title was one bestowed by Queen Elizabeth herself. Is that right?
I think so. Yes, I think that is the case, because, you know, let's be honest, we have a king now who went through all the business of divorce and all the other controversies. And back in the 1930s, at the time of the abdication, a chap who was actually got on the throne. Well, he was never crowned, but he was certainly king. But he had to depart again because it was all frowned upon in those days. So things have moved on generally in society, and the monarchy is moving along with it, and that's absolutely correct and jolly good too.
Yeah, and perhaps reflected at this event here in Bradford with, you know, the modern multicultural face of Britain as well, which the King is so keen to engage with.
Absolutely. A multicultural. I mean, King Charles has always made a great point of saying, you know, this is a multicultural society, all the things that he's done. I've been very involved over the years in his when it was called the Prince's Trust. Of course, you've now been handing that sort of job over, getting employment opportunities, business opportunities for young people, often very disadvantaged young people or people who've been in trouble and so on. And it was very striking how many of those initiatives have gone to help communities, a bit like the sort of people we're seeing here in Bradford, a place that's had its ups and downs, a fantastic town in its day with the old woolen industry and so on. But it needs new things, needs new thinking, new opportunities. The Prince's Trust was terrific at that. King Charles has always had this in his mind as a most important thing to push forward, and most important initiatives. I pay tribute to him for that. Lots of other things, you know, one can argue, get controversies and disagree with the way they do things, the way they treat people or whatever. But when it comes to it, an awful lot of what this man has done all through his life comes to fruition.
OK, well, thank you, Nick, for being with us as we listen to the drummers, the Bradford Brass Band and the Punjabi Roots Academy. We are awaiting the arrival of the King and the Queen Consort. The camera is panning away. I don't know if that means the car is arriving. We'll just wait one moment because Rosie is waiting with the news bulletin for us. But, of course, we'll have these pictures live for you as it happens. You're watching GB News Live. Let's get news update for the moment with Rosie.
A very good afternoon to you. It's gone 1 o'clock, 1 minute past 1. I'll keep you up to date here at GB News. The Prime Minister's considering raising state pensions and benefits in line with inflation. Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt are also considering imposing up to £60 billion in tax rises and spending cuts in the autumn budget next week. The Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, Jonathan Ashworth, says the Conservatives are finally following their manifesto pledges.
We're calling on the government to honour the promise that they made. It's a manifesto commitment for the Conservative Party, but it's a promise that Rishi Sunak made less than 6 months ago. And indeed, my opposite number, Mel Stride, who's now the Work and Pension Secretary, just over a month ago he was saying we should inflation-proof both universal credit and the basic state pension. So we're just holding them to their promise.
Sir Gavin Williamson reportedly told a senior civil servant to slit your throat while he was Defence Secretary. The Guardian's reporting that Sir Gavin made the remarks in front of colleagues in a meeting and on another occasion told them to jump out of the window. It's understood the former Chief Whip, Wendy Morton, has referred a separate allegation that Sir Gavin sent abusive messages to her Parliament's phone to the bullying watchdog. Scrutiny is mounting on the Prime Minister's decision to reinstate Sir Gavin into the Cabinet after it became clear that Rishi Sunak was aware of bullying allegations. Sir Gavin denies the allegations of bullying. Boris Johnson has asked the MPs he's nominated for peerages to delay taking them so they don't trigger by-elections in their constituencies. Nadine Dorris and Alok Sharma are amongst those that the Times are reporting to have been given them. The Conservatives are currently behind the Labour Party in most official opinion polls. 16 Just Stop Oil protesters have been arrested for blocking several junctions of the M25 on the second day of action on the motorway. Police were forced to halt traffic on the Dartford crossing for over an hour. It has now been reopened. Met Police deployed specialist removal teams to deal with the protesters. Well, 8 demonstrators charged with conspiracy to cause a public nuisance in yesterday's protest are due to appear at Westminster Magistrates' Court.
We hear these fine words from our latest Prime Minister saying, yeah, it's important, we need to do stuff. The time for words is over. We will stop the disruption, Mr. Sunak, when you say you are going to stop new oil and gas licences because we don't need them. We've got renewable energy, we can move to that, we can save lives. Do it now, please.
Millions of Americans are heading to vote today in the midterm elections. Currently, the Democrats control both chambers of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. If the Republicans take either, it will limit President Joe Biden's ability to pass laws. President Biden has warned that a Republican victory could weaken the country's democratic institutions.
Today, we face an inflection point, one of those moments that comes around every 3 or 4 generations. We know in our bones that our democracy is at risk, and we know that this is your moment to defend it, preserve it, protect it, choose it.
Well, meanwhile, the former US President Donald Trump has given his biggest hint yet that he'll be running for the White House again.
This is the year we're going to take back the House, we're going to take back the Senate, and we're going to take back America. And in 2024, most importantly, we are going to take back our magnificent White House. I'm going to be making a very big announcement on Tuesday, November 15th at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida.
Millions of people on low incomes will receive payments of £324 from today as part of the government's cost of living support. There's no need to apply for the scheme. Those eligible will automatically receive it. The government's support package also includes a £400 discount on energy bills paid in monthly instalments between now and March. The government is understood to be nearing a deal with France over the Channel migrant crisis. The agreement could see British immigration officers stationed in French control rooms, allowing them to observe French operations and coordinate beach searches for boats that are being prepared to launch into the Channel. It's believed the deal's worth around £80 million, as in its final stages. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, back to Mark.
Rosie, thanks very much indeed. We'll head back to Bradford in a moment for the visit of the King and Queen Consort. But let's bring you some sad news that we're getting from the world of entertainment, that Leslie Phillips, the comedy actor, has died at the age of 98. It's just been confirmed by his agent, Jonathan Lloyd, who's spoken to the Press Association news agency, saying that he died peacefully in his sleep on Monday. And Phillips, of course, well known for his catchphrases, including ding dong, well I say, and well hello. A star of all the Carry On films and many wonderful British comedies of the 1950s and 60s. And then, of course, more recently starring in one of the, or two of the Harry Potter films. And basically portrayals of the English upper-class twit, if you won't mind us saying that, but actually born in Tottenham and speaking estuary English, he said. It's sad news. Anyway, let's head back to Bradford, because I think the King and Queen Consort are due to arrive there imminently. These are the scenes in Centenary Square in Bradford, the police and security there with the many crowds. We were hearing from the Bradford Brass Band and the Punjabi drummers of the Punjabi Roots Academy. I think our cameraman trying to catch up with where the King and Queen Consort. Apologies for that hose piping, as they call it, as the camera moving around. Let's try and see if we can get the King in vision, because they have arrived there for a visit to the City Hall to meet dignitaries. And then we're told we'll be visiting the headquarters of the Morrison's supermarket, which is based there because of their sustainability initiatives. And we think that the King will be stepping out of his car fairly imminently and is, I think, on walkabout in the crowd. If we can just see the pictures there, clearly a huge crowd now gathering to greet the King. And this clearly is one of the features now of this new monarchy. I think he's just behind all those camera phones going up there to get pictures. Let's see if we can get another shot from the steps there of the town hall where the dignitaries are awaiting. The receptions for young leaders, we're being told, in Bradford, obviously a very multicultural city and the UK's newest city. So much to celebrate. And there is the King, indeed. I'm not sure if the Queen Consort is with him in Bradford, but we do know that she is joining the King on the visit to York tomorrow. It's a two-day visit to Yorkshire, and the King clearly taking a lot of time to talk to well-wishers and people who've gathered there. And as we say, the ubiquitous camera phone catching a glimpse of the King, even though it's blocking the view of our own particular cameras there. But the King looking in good humour, very relaxed, as Nicholas Owen was telling us. Nick, of course, ITN's former royal correspondent, saying how comfortable the King obviously felt in his new role and in meeting members of the public, shaking hands and having a few words with people at the front of this massive crowd that's gathered in Centenary Square. Just to update you then, we're being told that he'll be visiting Leeds Building Society a little later as well, which is based in Bradford, with clearly a cost of living crisis and financial matters uppermost in many people's minds. But the King taking time to have a conversation with people who've gathered there, and I think some flowers as ever being handed across, being taken away by an equerry there. And I think we can just hear the drummers who've struck up again in the background, the Punjabi Roots Academy. Yeah, we can hear them there, with the Bradford Brass Band as well. Quite a mix of musical tastes there, but they're really doing a fine job. And a wave there from the King after many, many handshakes as he heads towards the red carpet. As we say, the King on his own at the moment. The Queen Consort, we now understand, will be in York with him tomorrow on this two-day visit. But now meeting all the civil dignitaries outside Bradford City Hall. Everyone quite rightly sporting their poppies as well at this time of remembrance, of course. Bradford, one of Britain's most successful multicultural centres, despite what has to be said have been some tensions in various communities, but it is the newest city in Britain, and therefore I think the choice of the King to come here and reflect that in his new reign. And certainly young leaders are waiting inside City Hall there for him to meet and greet and talk about what they've been doing in the city. And hopefully another turn to the cameras and a shake of the hand before he heads up that red carpet into the steps. And we'll be returning to Bradford a little later, of course, for all the other royal events as they happen. But up the red carpet he goes. Will we get another turn and a wave? Yes, we will, of course. 2 waves, in fact. And a smile. Well, there we are. King Charles at Bradford, and as we say, we'll head back to North Yorkshire and reflect on that visit a little later. But let's head across the Atlantic now, with millions of American voters heading to the polls to vote in their midterm elections. Typically seen as a test on just how well or badly a US president is doing, with key issues such as the economy, crime and abortion, all likely to influence which way those ballots go. Well, currently the Democrats controlling both US chambers of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, but the Republicans only need 5 seats to win a majority in the House and just 1 seat to control the Senate. And if that happens, it will effectively make President Biden a so-called lame duck president for the next 2 years, with the Republicans blocking his ability to pass any laws. Well, meanwhile, a certain Donald Trump has used his final rally to give his biggest hint yet that he'll run for president again in 2024. Our political reporter Catherine Foster has been following events in the States.
The Democrats were optimistic just weeks ago. That has faded. Control of Congress is on a knife edge. Polls suggest the Democrats will lose their wafer-thin majority in the House of Representatives. The Senate is currently split 50-50. 1 more single seat would give Republicans control. Whoever resides in the White House usually loses ground in the midterms, and Biden will struggle to push through legislation without a majority in one or both houses. Voters are worried about inflation and recession. Republican Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, blames the Democrats.
We have the worst inflation that we've had in this country in 4 decades. And that didn't happen by accident. It happened because he came in and they printed and borrowed and spent trillions and trillions of dollars when they were warned if they did that, it would spark exactly the type of inflation that we've seen now.
President Joe Biden is warning the consequences of this vote will be profound.
We face one of those inflection points, one of those moments that not only comes around every 3, 4, 5 generations. We all know it in our bones that our democracy is at risk.
Previous Democrat presidents, including Barack Obama, are rallying around Biden with similar messages.
This habit we have of demonizing political opponents, of saying crazy stuff, it creates a dangerous climate.
Obama and Bill Clinton both did badly in their midterms but were re-elected. But President Biden is almost 80 and his approval ratings are dire. His Vice President Kamala Harris is unpopular too. And then there's this former president, Donald Trump, still claiming the last election was stolen.
I ran twice, I won twice, and I did much better the second time than I did the first. And now, in order to make our country successful, safe, and glorious, I will probably have to do it again, but stay tuned.
In 2022, the United States of America is anything but united. Catherine Forster, GB News.
Well, the polls have opened, and joining us now, Lewis Lukins, former Deputy Chief of Mission at the US Embassy in the UK, now Senior Partner at Signum Global Advisors. Lewis, thanks for joining us. As we say that the polls have opened, you were saying that the indications are that already it's record voting underway.
Record early voting.
Yeah.
So over the last month, something like 22 million Americans have voted, more than voted 4 years ago in those midterm elections.
And what's driving people? Is it, as we heard with the Clinton days, the economy's stupid, or is it the fact, as Biden says, democracy may be at stake in many people's view?
It's both, probably more the economy. In the most recent polls of the most important issues for Americans, it's inflation, the economy, crime, immigration. Those are all issues in which Republicans poll more strongly. And then you get down to abortion rights and gun control, which are sort of traditionally Democratic issues.
And how much could this be a plebiscite on Biden himself, given, I think, the last I saw figure on his approval rating was down at 42. I mean, he's really struggling, isn't he?
He has struggled for the last 2 years to break out of the low 40s. The first midterm election is always a referendum on the president in the White House. And I think this year will be no different. I think, it is a referendum on Joe Biden. It's also going to be, I think, a referendum on Donald Trump's possible run.
Yeah, and the problem in that is that he has candidates that he's perhaps been supporting for the Republican cause who are election deniers, effectively. They still have this narrative that the election was stolen from them last time round.
Yeah, I mean, many of the candidates are. I think some of them don't actually believe that, but it's a way that they can motivate the Republican base and try to do well today.
Yeah.
But some of them certainly are believers, I think, and that's the dangerous factor. There are some key races today in battleground states for the governorship, for Secretary of State jobs, where there are election deniers running who could have an impact on the next election 2 years from now.
And is this a political battle in that sense, or is America now increasingly divided?
It's both. I mean, it is a political battle, as it always is, but America is increasingly divided. People get their news from such different sources, and there's different realities. And there are Americans who believe that Donald Trump won the last election, and of course, Americans who don't. And so the country is increasingly divided, and I think it's increasingly difficult to bridge that gap.
Yeah. Now, as Catherine said in her report, both Obama and Clinton did really badly in the midterms, went on to win the presidential election, but we think it's very unlikely that Biden will run again. And we hear that there will be an announcement at Mar-a-Lago on Tuesday, we think. Do you believe that Trump will run again?
I think Trump will announce again. I'm not sure he stays in the race for 2 years,
right.
but I think he'll announce and he'll get into the race. And as long as he's in the race, I think Joe Biden will be in the race, because Joe Biden believes he's the only Democrat who can beat Donald Trump. And he may be right about that. But at some point, I think between now and probably a year from now, I think Donald Trump drops out, and I think then Biden steps down.
Right. So we would get that generational change for both Republicans and Democrats, but not until further down the line then?
Yes. I mean, obviously, the leadership of both parties is quite old. Joe Biden is turning 80, I think, next week. Donald Trump is not far behind that. But I think the people who are interested in replacing them and being the candidates in 2 years are much younger. They're in their 50s and 60s.
Yeah. Now, what about the special relationship? We've been hearing today that there may be this deal on liquid natural gas between the States and Britain, something that perhaps Biden had spoken to Liz Truss about. Is it an indication, perhaps, that we still have those ties across the Atlantic, which have been suggested were, getting a bit frayed?
Yeah, I mean, look, those ties have always been strong. They have remained strong. They tend to remain strong. It doesn't matter who's prime minister, who's president. The underlying cultural and economic and commercial ties are so strong between our countries that it takes a lot more than a change of leadership to really affect them.
Yeah, and what about, as you say, that cultural issue with all the various conspiracy theories and the various news outlets who go different directions? I mean, is there still that cultural link between the two countries across the Atlantic?
I think it's a very strong cultural links. I mean, Americans were very saddened by the passing of the Queen.
Yes,
I think there's huge interest in what happens here in the UK, and I think vice versa. The Brits are very, very interested in what's happening in America. Look at the coverage today of America's election.
Yeah, and indeed we'll be following that. I think early hours of this morning UK time, we'll get those first results coming in.
Tomorrow morning, yeah.
Yeah. And who comes in first? I'm just trying to remember.
I think, well, the East Coast states, Virginia, Pennsylvania, some of those key states will come in first. We'll have to wait much longer for the West Coast, obviously.
Yeah, and where do you think the main battleground will be?
Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona.
OK, so mid-morning tomorrow maybe we'll get a clear indication.
Yeah, hope so.
Lewis, great for you coming in and taking us through that. Good to see you, and we'll see what emerges overnight, of course. Thanks very much indeed. Now, let's head on and just reflect that they're at it again, those M25 protesters, the activists up on the gantries once more. Do they think they're above the law? We'll be reflecting on that after this short break.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Are authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime? With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
And welcome back to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. So, despite that threat of court action, the protesters have been at it again, with large parts of the M25 motorway bringing to a halt for a second day running. Police saying their actions in climbing the gantries over the main carriageway a criminally hazardous act. Well, 16 arrests were made, but the Just Stop Oil group say they'll continue with their actions and would not be intimidated, they say, by changes in the law. Earlier, we spoke to Laura Johnson, a spokesperson for the group, who said the environmental issues were real and that the government was to blame.
Well, it's really unfortunate that we've got to this stage, but as I said, we're being lied to and we're being let down, and people they have every right to be angry. We are disrupting their day, but they need to start redirecting that anger at the government and realise that we are not the bad guys. We are calling the alarm.
Well, you are the bad guys in terms of disrupting the major orbital motorway for 2 days running, when people are trying to get to hospital appointments, doctor's appointments, trying to get their children to school, trying to get to work. What good does it actually do?
Well, the past has shown us that civil disobedience, civil resistance against corrupt regimes or corrupt governments does actually work. We had 40-degree heat this year. We had birds falling out of the sky, train tracks buckled from the heat. We had wildfires. Over 1,000 people died from 40-degree heat in just 48 hours. What's going to happen next year? This is real now, and people are dying now. And people need to wake up and be angry at the government and not be angry with us.
Well, let's get more now with our national reporter, Theo Chikombo, who's on the M25 at the exit to Swanley. And, Theo, we can see that the traffic is moving again, but police less than impressed with the actions this morning, saying that really it put a lot of people at risk.
Yes, that's right. I'm just on a bridge at the moment, just above the M25. And this morning, in the early hours, just over my right in that direction, anti-clockwise on the M25, heading towards the Dartford Tunnel. They had to close it around 7 a.m. Essex Police this morning have had to be working with Kent Police and Surrey Police as well, having that disruption. Hundreds of motorists trying to get to work or going home or to go to other places as well. As you mentioned, 16 people have been arrested. This is the second day of causing disruption. Environmental people who work in the industry have been saying this is not the right way to do it. It's calling it controversial and saying this is divisive, it's not helping their cause. But what they say is that they want the licenses in the North Sea to stop new licenses being given for fossil fuels. But of course, is this the right way to do it? We heard there from your guest just a few moments ago that they want the government to take action, but of course it's causing a lot of disruption and traffic for people and emergency services trying to get to where they need to.
Yeah, police were saying they were proactively patrolling the M25 this morning, clearly after what happened yesterday. But even so, they were unable to prevent people actually climbing onto these gantries, which may surprise motorists, thinking that surely there might be some security precautions in place to stop you actually climbing up.
Well, this is the thing. I've been here for a couple of hours going up and down in both directions, and you are seeing police who are patrolling the area, but they would have to have police cars in every single gantry. There's just one to the right of me here. At the moment, it's 50 miles an hour. It was about 20 miles an hour about 20 minutes ago. But of course, the police have got other things to do. They shouldn't have to be doing this. But of course, people can say they should be doing that, but they'd need a lot of manpower because they are about a mile apart and there needs so many of them patrolling for the entire day.
Indeed, so a huge operation. Well, Theo, thanks for updating us there, and good to see that the traffic's moving. Thanks very much indeed. And indeed, just on that very issue, let's just remind you what we had earlier from the police, Essex Police in particular, saying they'd mobilised a significant amount of resources, they say, which should have been tackling knife crime, helping investigate sexual and domestic offences and responding to burglaries. Chief Superintendent Simon Anslow saying, we understand the anger and frustration, but want to assure people we are working hard to prevent criminal acts and respond as quickly as we can where they take place. And of course, we'll see what happens tomorrow. But that's what they were trying to do a little earlier. Now, let's look ahead to what might be coming down the line on that autumn statement. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak expected to perhaps increase pensions and benefits in line with, well, inflation or wages. We shall see. It's a hokey-cokey, as it's been described, the positioning of the Tories on triple lock pensions. But inheritance tax, well, what will happen there? Reports suggesting Chancellor Jeremy Hunt planning a stealth raid in the autumn budget, trying to fill, of course, what's could be a £50 billion black hole in the public finances. Joining us once more, our business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. Liam, thank you for coming in once more to run your slide rule over what we might be expecting. Stealth taxes, Gordon Brown's great weapon, of course, and we're talking about things like inheritance tax, pensions, lifetime allowance, triple lock. They sort of slide by in the small print of these statements, don't they?
That's right. You referred to the triple lock. That's the manifesto commitment from the Tories that the basic state pension will go up either by 2.5%, the increase in average earnings over the last year, or the increase in the consumer price.
And it's suspended at the moment, of course, for this year, particularly.
Yeah. I think the Tories will implement the triple lock. I think a lot of the will he, won't he thing is to make sure there's a lot of attention on it. So when they do implement the triple lock, which is a manifesto commitment, they wring as much benefit out of it as they possibly can for sort of presentational purposes. What we're hearing now, though, is that to pay for that massive increase in 10.1% increase in the basic state pension, forever, they're going to have to raise taxes elsewhere. But, of course, politicians don't like raising headline tax rates because that's really easy for busy people to understand. Oh, my God, and you can see it easily from your wage slip that you're being taxed at a certain percentage. Of course, the base rate of income tax is 20%. If they put that up, there'll be lots and lots of gnashing of teeth. So what politicians often do, and Gordon Brown did it and Rishi Sunak is doing it as well, is they implement something called fiscal drag, and that means you freeze the threshold where you start paying tax where it is. So as wages go up, as inflation goes up over the years, you get dragged into a higher tax bracket. And we're seeing more and more people dragged into the top rate of tax, which is roughly about 50 grand, relatively, not...
This is the 40% band.
Not particularly well-paid people, £50,000 obviously is big compared to the average wage, which is about £30,000. But for an awful lot of people, £50,000, it doesn't make you spectacularly well off at all, particularly in today's climate. And more of those people will be paying tax at 40% because those thresholds, Sunak froze them in 2021 until 2026 when he was Chancellor. He's now going to, let me finish, he's now going to freeze them until 2028. The new bit of information we have is that as well as freezing those income tax thresholds, they might now also freeze the inheritance tax threshold.
Yeah. And also the lifetime allowance on pensions, which was obviously, as Ros Altman said, a real hit on pensioners because it's not just the state pension, it's their own money they put by.
Yeah. But actually, the lifetime allowance on pensions is about £1 million. If you've got a pension pot of £1 million, you're going to be fine.
Although, let's reflect, you may be only getting 40 grand back per year on that.
But for the vast majority of people, a £40,000 guaranteed income for life is, completely otherworldly. I just want to focus on the inheritance tax threshold, Mark, if I may, because the inheritance, I'm not qualified to give financial advice. We're an Ofcom channel. No, I have to say that. I have to say that.
Yeah.
It's very serious stuff.
The FCA rules.
I hear a lot of journalists giving financial advice, and they're breaking the rules. So I'm not qualified to give financial advice. Let me say that. I've said it twice. But I'm reporting that the inheritance tax threshold is £325,000. So if you're a married couple, it's £700,000. So if you're bequeathing a house to your kids or an estate which is worth more than £700,000, you're going to pay 40% on the bit that's above the threshold. Now, the thing is, Mark, this inheritance tax threshold, Sunak has already frozen it till 2026. He's now, we think, going to freeze it till 2028. But the absolutely astonishing point, and I didn't realise this until I just looked it up, is that inheritance tax threshold has been at £325,000 since 2009.
Yeah.
Right? It's been there for 13 years, and it's going to end up being there for almost 20 years.
Yeah. But you've also got within that your main residence as part of that.
Yeah.
But given what's happened in that time period to prices, house prices, you're up through the roof,
That's
literally.
Right. I mean, if you are a single person and you're bequeathing a home to your kids, right?
Yeah.
A £325,000 home, right?
It's a one-bedroom flat in some places.
It is not an extravagant home. It is a normal home. It's a home that's lower than the average property price in the UK, which includes, flats, includes single-bedroom flats, bed-sits and everything. And I think this process has to have a limit. Inheritance tax for ordinary people bequeathing a small, modest home to their children, a home they've paid for all their lives through a mortgage, servicing that mortgage itself out of post-tax income, right? A lot of Conservative voters, a lot of Labour voters are not going to like this.
And a lot of Conservative politicians may not like it either. So we shall see on the 17th. Liam, as ever, thank you for that. Let's catch up with the latest news headlines now. Rosie's waiting for us.
A very good afternoon to you. It is 1:35. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Rishi Sunak is considering raising state pensions and benefits in line with inflation. The Prime Minister and Chancellor are also considering imposing up to £60 billion in tax rises and spending cuts in the autumn budget next week. Sir Gavin Williamson reportedly told a senior civil servant to slit your throat while he was Defence Secretary. The Guardian's reporting that Sir Gavin made the remarks in front of colleagues in a meeting and on another occasion told them to jump out of the window. Sir Gavin denies the new claims. Boris Johnson has asked MPs he's nominated for peerages to delay taking them so they don't trigger by-elections in their constituencies. Nadine Dorris and Alok Sharma are amongst those that the Times are reporting to have been given the honours. The Conservatives are currently behind the Labour Party in most official opinion polls. The government's understood to be nearing a deal with France over the Channel migrant crisis. The agreement could see British immigration officers stationed in French control rooms, allowing them to coordinate beach searches for boats being launched into the water. It's believed the deal's worth around £80 million. Downing Street have played down speculation of the deal, saying discussions are ongoing. Leslie Phillips has died peacefully in his sleep, aged 98. That's according to his agent. The actor was made famous for starring in the Carry On films in the late 50s and early 60s. Later in his career, he ventured as the voice of the Sorting Hat in the Harry Potter films. We're on your TV, online and your DAB+ radio. It's GB News. Mark will be back in a moment. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.1436 and €1.1444 euros. The price of gold is £1,462 and 28 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,298 points.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. Now let's head to the States with the US midterm elections taking place today. Millions of Americans going to the polls to vote. It's held halfway through a president's 4-year term, so typically seen as a test of whoever is in the White House and how they're doing. Yes, not too good maybe for Joe Biden at the moment. Well, currently the Democrats controlling both the US chambers of Congress, that's the House of Representatives and the Senate. But their majority is slim. Republicans only need 5 seats to take the House, just 1 to control the Senate. A lot is at stake. Well, we're joined now by Francis Buckley, a former speechwriter for former President Donald Trump. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Before we head to the elections themselves, Francis, let's cut to the chase. What's going to happen next Tuesday with Donald Trump announcing that something will be said from Mar-a-Lago? Is he going to run for president again, do you think?
I rather hope not, and I'd be frankly surprised if he did. I think at this point he's very much a negative. He lost in 2020, and if he ran again in 2024, he'd be a 2-time loser. So I think the Republican Party is healthy, and while there is support for Trump, a lot of it here in America is just a matter of flipping the bird at Democrats and for the crazy politics of the last 2 years. I mean, we have an election today, as you say, and I'm Republican, so I'm going to be sitting back with a bag of popcorn and enjoying myself tonight. I think it'll be a great night. I think the Republicans will take both houses, and that will represent a severe rebuke, not just to Biden, who's so over the hill, but also to the mindset of a progressive administration that has expressed its contempt for America. And
right.
You know, we've had enough of that.
So are they voting, do you think, on the economy stupid, as we remember for those Clinton years, or are they voting on Biden and I think his ratings down to 42, thinking that he is out of time and out of touch?
Well, it's both, right? He's so out of touch that they didn't pay any attention to inflation, which is very much a real issue here. And most people recognize that it's been fueled by excessive spending by the Democrats. And it's time for payback, right? We know the problem and we know what caused the problem, and we're going to try to begin to cure it today.
How about the issue of democracy, which Biden has raised at these various rallies, given all the problems that the Trump supporters have raised about the last election, how it was stolen and so on and so forth? I mean, is that really going to be divisive in these midterms?
It's not an issue at all, right? When polled, Americans don't think it's anything as important as the state of the economy, for example, or more importantly, crime in the streets, perhaps. So that's not much of an issue. And frankly, when you get down to it, if you ask yourself which party has been defending democracy, well, it's not, I think, the party that has been rubbishing our Constitution for the last couple of years, declaring it to be racist, created by a bunch of slaveholders, and they want to move on for it, and they say they're in favor of democracy. Well, they're not in favor, it seems, of constitutional government, and we've noted that as well.
Yeah, but I'm just interested in the dynamic that if the Republicans, as expected, do pretty well, does Trump see that as his green light to come back? And therefore, what happens to other candidates such as Ron DeSantis, for instance?
Well, frankly, we don't know. Look, I'm very much hoping that he's going to decide that the vote today will be a vindication of the things he's been saying, and that, therefore, it is not necessary for him to do anything. But then you never know.
And what about then governing America for the next 2 years if the Republicans gain in the House and the Senate, as we've been discussing, the Democratic power game is over. It's a lame duck presidency.
It's lame duck, but the point about American politics and of the American Constitution is this is a country of strong presidentialism, and there is just a lot, way too much the president can do, paying no attention whatsoever to Congress. And so what we're going to see are a lot of investigations of what has happened in the last couple of years. But we can't enact legislation, and it's hard to block the president. He'll do things, and it's going to be very hard to make him stop, unless possibly they get to him and say, look, Joe, this hasn't worked. Find a new set of friends. Remember how Clinton triangulated in 1994. You should be talking to us.
Yeah, because, of course, Obama and Clinton did actually very badly in their midterms.
Very much so.
So what does that tell us about the way forward? I mean, both Trump and Biden are pretty elderly. I mean, is there any evidence of a generational change in US politics?
Well, there is a generational change, but, the funny thing is it's happening all the time. In other words, yes, when people talk about generations, they'll talk about Generation Z or Z.
Yeah.
Right. But then, over time, Generation Z gets a bit older and, hopefully gets married and has kids. And so they become part of the change just by getting older.
And become Republican as well, perhaps.
Yes. Right.
OK. Well, look, we'll let you enjoy your popcorn as it happens. Of course, I think voting underway, indications, record early voting already. So we'll see what happens and emerges overnight. Francis Buckley, thanks for joining us there in Alexandria. Cheers. The voice from the States. Now, let's head back here with Northern Ireland currently having no government, facing another period of, no political leadership or direction, it seems. rising costs to high chances of deep cuts in the public sector. Well, our Northern Ireland reporter Doogie Beattie has been finding out how local people are feeling at the moment.
Biggest fear I have that it will entrench division here in Northern Ireland, that we will have a sectarian headcount, people will be driven to their trenches, and that will not be good. And the outcome at the end of the election is not going to fix the problems we've got now.
We know that elections in Northern Ireland do not solve problems, they deepen the crisis. Right now there is one issue that is preventing us from restoring the Assembly.
The absence of an Assembly chamber won't influence that, but what it will do is make life worse for people across this society. That session in there today felt like a wake for power sharing.
Political voices full of frustration at the situation now facing politics in Northern Ireland. Stormont once again finds itself as a tourist attraction. The only visitors it's getting are those that's interested in history and architecture. The government here collapsed at the end of October because of legislation that ensured that there would be ministers in place up to 6 months after an election. Chris Heaton-Harris has said he will not call an election this side of Christmas, but what does that mean to the ordinary people of Northern Ireland?
Well, I believe there's principles in life that you should hold to, but when the people of the country need help, now's the time to lay those principles aside and to say, right, let's help the people.
Do you really want the truth? Yeah. It doesn't matter whether they're there or not.
But you just look back into it, so they do. People out there are struggling, can't afford to heat their house, food and all coming in.
Government or not, life goes on, and local councils will continue to do what they have done for years and ensure our everyday needs are met. But with rising costs, it's feared business rates will rise. Glenn Roberts from Retail NI is worried about the situation.
We have written out to all 11 councils, all 11 council chief executives, urging them when they strike their own rate to make it as low as possible. We have heard rumours that some councils are thinking of a 12.5%, an inflation-busting rise, and for many working families and businesses, that simply is unaffordable. And that is a reality that councils, they need to cut their cloth and be more realistic in how they approach the issue of rates.
A budget for the province must now be struck, and with a hole in the finances, meetings with the government have already happened.
Well, we had a good meeting with the Secretary of State last week, and we continue to engage with him and his team on this. I think a big ask to the Chancellor ahead of the statement in a few weeks' time is that further business support is needed. And we've said that we need the business rates holiday reintroduced that we had during COVID.
The largest casualties here will be the large infrastructure projects. More about how we get around rather than how we get on. Doogie Beattie, GB News, Belfast.
Difficulties continuing in Northern Ireland. Now let's just update you on the breaking news, the sad news we brought you that comic actor Leslie Phillips has died at the age of 98, of course, star of the Carry On films. Just to remind you, Carry On Nurse, Carry On Teacher and Carry On Constable. Ooh Matron, I think, was one of the catchphrases, as well as Ding Dong. We've just got a tribute being paid by his wife Zara, who said, "I've lost a wonderful husband and the public has lost a truly great showman. He was quite simply a national treasure. People loved him and he was mobbed everywhere he went." His agent confirming that he died on Monday at the age of 98 after a period of ill health. He had suffered a stroke when he was shopping in Oxford Street back in 2014, had recovered from that, but clearly at the age of 98, time caught up with him. But many, many tributes being paid to a wonderful actor, and most recently, of course, the voice of the Hat in the Harry Potter films. So we'll reflect on his career a little later. Now, today in Birmingham is their Poppy Day, the fundraising collection in aid of the Poppy Appeal for the Royal British Legion. Well, Jack Carson is there with the details for us. And Jack, you were at the National Arboretum yesterday for that Field of Remembrance, and a slightly different event now in the city centre there.
Yeah, so I'm here at Birmingham Poppy Day, which is the 7th City Poppy Day that the British Legion have put on this year. It's all in aid of course, raising money for that Poppy appeal and raising money for the British Legion, for them to help servicemen and women and veterans as well. And in time of the cost of living crisis, their support has never been more needed. But of course, it's not just veterans that the British Legion help and support. It's also a chance for servicemen and women to be recognised for their service. And one of those is Kartika, who joins me now, who's a Royal Air Force cyberspace specialist apprentice, and she joins me now. Can you tell me a little bit about your service?
So I've been in the RAF for just under a year now, and I have enjoyed it a lot, and I'm a cyberspace specialist and I graduate next March.
So what does that actually mean, cyberspace specialist? What are the kind of things that you do day to day?
So day to day I learn about different things such as like radios and networks and helping keep the comms secure for the defence.
And at a time like today is a time for remembrance, and this week especially, everyone has a personal story for remembrance. What's your personal story?
So my family-wise, my uncle served in the Indian Air Force, and growing up in Britain I've always wanted to do the same, serve the country that I've lived in. So for me it means to give back to the country I've always lived in. Thank you. And Poppy Day to me, it's a day to remember everyone in service, whether that be here or any other country in the world.
And why is the Poppy appeal, and why do you think remembrance is so important?
It's so important, so we learn from the mistakes in the past, whatever's happened, we can remember on it and reflect on it, as well as appreciate all the people that have given their lives away for us in the past.
Kartika, thank you very much for joining me. A perfect example there of why now here, not only here in Birmingham, but of course across the other city days as well, why it's so important to remember at this time. With Remembrance Day this Friday and Remembrance Sunday as well, the Poppy Appeal are out on the streets raising money for the British Legion.
Jack, thanks very much for updating us there in Birmingham city centre, and of course the Poppy is well in evidence. Thanks for your time there. Let's move from Birmingham to Bradford, bringing you those pictures that we had of King Charles arriving there a little earlier. Bradford, of course, UK's newest city, and we're being told now that he will be joined by the Queen Consort in York and Doncaster tomorrow, and that the details are coming through now that a statue of the late Queen Elizabeth, will be unveiled at York Minster. I think we can bring you just a live shot because he's actually in... with the bells there of City Hall in Bradford. Let's just have a quick listen to that. It sounds rather wonderful. Well, a very musical visit to Bradford, because earlier we heard the Bradford Brass Band and the students of the Punjabi Roots Academy drumming away as the King arrived for this visit to, as we said, the UK's newest city. And earlier we were being told the King visiting the HQ of Morrison's supermarket, wishing workers an early happy Christmas at the beginning of his two-day tour to Yorkshire. As he arrived, he chatted to those working at stores around the region, thanking them for their efforts to keep everyone fed and watered, adding, "I hope they let you off at Christmas." But here we got the pictures from a little earlier when the King arrived, and as ever a huge crowd there, which he spent time meeting and greeting and taking time to speak to many people. And clearly this is something that he is now very adept at doing, putting people at their ease and discovering how things have been in Bradford. We're told meeting many young people in the city's main city hall there, including young civic leaders, and then going on to Leeds Building Society to meeting people there who've been helping all those people with their mortgages recently, so no doubt he'll be interested in that. And as we say, tomorrow he will be joined with the Queen Consort, Camilla the Queen Consort, who will be heading, we're told, to York and Doncaster, and that statue at York Minster being unveiled of the late Queen Elizabeth. So we'll have that for you here on GB News tomorrow. Also, and this is important, conferring city status on Doncaster. So those of you in Doncaster, join us for that tomorrow. Doncaster joining Bradford there in Yorkshire on this very historic occasion. So a 2-day visit to Yorkshire, more coming up as we see the King a little later. Well, also coming up here on GB News Live, we'll be looking at the latest on the Stop Oil protests. A lot of you wishing they'd just stop. And a potential major UK-US gas deal, plus all the latest from Westminster. But right now, let's get an update on the weather.
Hello, very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern. Further showers today, especially in the west, once again, just like yesterday. But there'll be a better chance of some sunny spells and some longer-lasting drier interludes compared with the last couple of days. The weather is certainly changeable at the moment. That's because we've got all these westerlies coming in from the Atlantic, low pressure in charge, and various weather fronts at play. But actually, these old fronts are not causing too many problems, I think. They're mostly showery features. And as we start off the day, Northern England, parts of Wales in particular, will be subject to quite a number of showers, some more prolonged rain in places. By the time we get to the afternoon, though, there'll be a better chance of gaps between the showers, some sunny spells, and some places might not see that many showers, certainly compared with the last couple of days. 15 Celsius in the south, 12 Celsius for Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, North Wales, with less of a gusty wind compared with the last couple of days, so that might help make it feel a bit more pleasant where we managed to dodge the showers. All change, though, later in the day because the showers ease away, but thicker clouds arrive from the north and the west, and as a result, we're going to see some light outbreaks of rain over western hills, some more persistent rain for parts of northern and northwest Scotland. But with the breeze picking up from the southwest, well, that's a mild direction, and as a result, temperatures are rising. It's a mild start to Thursday. And for southeastern areas in particular, it's a mostly dry day. There'll be some breaks with that cloud, some sunshine coming through. However, the cloud will always be thickest towards the west and the northwest. We'll see some light outbreaks of rain over the hills and some more persistent wet weather for the northwest of Scotland. It's a breezy day, but actually, with that breeze coming from the southwest, it is going to be milder once again, 16 Celsius in the south or even 17 Celsius. And that trend continues through Friday and the weekend. Unsettled in the northwest, drier in the southeast, but very mild for all of us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello and a very warm welcome to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. And coming up this hour, the Just Stop Oil disruption Well, it just doesn't stop. They've jammed the M25 for a second day. The Metropolitan Police saying 16 protesters were arrested today in a joint operation with neighbouring forces, sections of the motorway being brought to a grinding halt. We'll be live on the M25 for the latest. And live to Bradford. The King is actually leaving Bradford City Hall, and he's heading off for more events in North Yorkshire on a 2-day visit there to Britain's newest city. We'll have the latest live for you. On the political front, yet more complaints about this man, Cabinet Minister Sir Gavin Williamson. Yesterday it emerged he'd sent abusive messages to the former Chief Whip. Today, an allegation he told a senior civil servant to slit your throat, as he cut his own throat in the process. And could Donald Trump be poised for a political comeback? Voters heading to the polls for the midterm elections in the US. Huge gains now expected for the Republicans. We'll be getting the latest from the States. And as ever, get in touch with us, GB News or GBViews at gbnews.uk. What do you think of Just Stop Oil, Gavin Williamson and Donald Trump? Quite a menu for you. Before that, latest news headlines with Rosie.
Good afternoon, 2 minutes past 2. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The Prime Minister's considering raising state pensions and benefits in line with inflation. Rishi Sunak and the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt are also considering imposing up to £60 billion in tax rises and spending cuts in the autumn budget next week. The Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Jonathan Ashworth says the Conservatives are finally following their manifesto pledges.
We're calling on the government to honour the promise that they made. It's a manifesto commitment for the Conservative Party, but it's a promise that Rishi Sunak made less than 6 months ago. And indeed, my opposite number, Mel Stride, who's now the Work and Pensions Secretary, just over a month ago he was saying we should inflation-proof both universal credit and the basic state pension. So we're just holding them to their promise.
Sir Gavin Williamson reportedly told a senior civil servant to slit your throat while he was Defence Secretary. The Guardian's reporting that Sir Gavin made the remarks in front of colleagues in a meeting and on another occasion told them to jump out of the window. It's understood the former Chief Whip, Wendy Morton, has referred a separate allegation that Sir Gavin sent abusive messages to her Parliament's bullying watchdog. Scrutiny's mounting on the Prime Minister's decision to reinstate Sir Gavin into Cabinet after it became clear that Rishi Sunak was aware of bullying allegations. Sir Gavin denies the allegations. Boris Johnson has asked the MPs he'd nominated for peerages to delay taking them so they don't trigger by-elections in their constituencies. Nadine Dorris, Alok Sharma, they're amongst those that the Times are reporting to have been given them. The Conservatives are currently behind the Labour Party in most official opinion polls. 16 Just Stop Oil protesters have been arrested for blocking several junctions in the M25 on their second day of action on the motorway. Police were forced to halt traffic on the Dartford crossing for over an hour, but it has now reopened. Met Police deployed specialist removal teams to deal with the protesters. Meanwhile, 8 demonstrators charged with conspiracy to cause public nuisance in yesterday's protest are due to appear at Westminster Magistrates' Court.
We hear these fine words from our latest Prime Minister saying, yeah, it's important, we need to do stuff. The time for words is over. We will stop the disruption, Mr. Sunak, when you say you are going to stop new oil and gas licences because we don't need them. We've got renewable energy, we can move to that, we can save lives. Do it now, please.
Millions of Americans are voting today in the midterm elections. Currently, the Democrats control both chambers of Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. If the Republicans take either, it will limit President Joe Biden's ability to pass laws. President Biden has warned that a Republican victory could weaken the country's democratic institutions.
Today, we face an inflection point, one of those moments that comes around every 3 or 4 generations. We know in our bones that our democracy is at risk, and we know that this is your moment to defend it, preserve it, protect it, choose it.
Meanwhile, the former US President Donald Trump has given his biggest hint yet that he'll be running for the White House again.
This is the year we're going to take back the House, we're going to take back the Senate, and we're going to take back America. And in 2024, most importantly, we are going to take back our magnificent White House. I'm going to meet making a very big announcement on Tuesday, November 15th at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida.
Millions of people on low income will receive payments of £324 from today as part of the government's cost of living support. There's no need to apply for the scheme. Those eligible will automatically receive it. The government support package also includes a £400 discount on energy bills paid in monthly instalments between now and March. The government's understood to be nearing a deal with France over the Channel migrant crisis. The agreement could see British immigration officers stationed in French control rooms, allowing them to observe French operations and coordinate beach searches. It's believed the deal's worth about £80 million, as in its final stages. Leslie Phillips has died peacefully in his sleep, aged 98. That's the news according to his agent. The actor was made famous for starring in the Carry On films in the late 50s and early 60s. Later in his career, he featured as the voice of the Sorting Hat in the Harry Potter films. You're up to date. I'll bring you more as it develops. Now back to Mark.
Rosie, thanks very much indeed. So, the Metropolitan Police saying 16 protesters arrested today in the latest joint operation with neighbouring forces after sections of the M25 brought to a halt for the second day running. Police saying their actions in climbing gantries over the main carriageway a criminally hazardous act. Well, 8 people had already been charged with conspiracy to cause a public nuisance following yesterday's protest action. But the Just Stop Oil group say they will continue with their actions and they would not be intimidated, they say, by changes in the law. Earlier, we spoke to Laura Johnson, a spokesperson for the group, saying that the environmental issues were real and that the government was to blame.
Well, it's really unfortunate that we've got to this stage, but as I said, we're being lied to and we're being let down, and people they have every right to be angry. We are disrupting their day, but they need to start redirecting that anger at the government and realise that we are not the bad guys. We are calling the alarm.
Well, you are the bad guys in terms of disrupting the major orbital motorway for 2 days running when people are trying to get to hospital appointments, doctor's appointments, trying to get their children to school, trying to get to work. What good does it actually do?
Well, the past has shown us that civil disobedience, civil resistance against corrupt regimes or corrupt governments does actually work. We had 40-degree heat this year. We had birds falling out of the sky, train tracks buckled from the heat. We had wildfires. Over 1,000 people died from 40-degree heat in just 48 hours. What's going to happen next year? This is real now, and people are dying now. And people need to wake up and be angry at the government and not be angry with us.
Well, let's just reflect on one comment from a motorist stuck in the queues who'd been trying to get their 93-year-old cousin to hospital. To the imbeciles protesting on the M25, I'm sitting with the engine off while the police remove them, they said. Police saying they had to use special climbing units to get on top of the gantries to remove the protesters. Well, let's speak now to our national reporter, Thea Chikombo, who's on the M25 near Swanley. And Thea, that's about a mile away from this Dartford tunnel where they had the problems earlier, and you were indicating the problems the police have got in trying to prevent these things happening, these gantries at least a mile apart along the motorway.
Hi Mark, yes, that's right. These gantries are fairly close to each other, so it would require a lot of manpower for police to be manning them all day. Now, as you know, they started these protests in the early hours of this morning. Around 7 o'clock, someone was blocking off, standing on a gantry just on the other side here on the Dartford tunnel, and the road had to be closed. Essex Police, working with Kent Police and Surrey Police, have been working around the clock to ensure that they can get them down and allow traffic to come back into force. At the moment, the road has longer there, so it's running smoothly, but again, it has caused a lot of disruption today and yesterday as well.
And have you got any indication if the authorities are able to do anything to prevent this happening again tomorrow if the protesters decide to take more action?
At the moment, the police have been saying they're working around the clock, ensuring that they are able to move them on so that traffic can go back. But they haven't specifically said how many people they're going to be using to ensure that this doesn't cause any more disruption in the next few days.
Get under cover and save your umbrella before it gets blown inside out. Thanks for updating us in hazardous conditions there. Thank you very much indeed. Hazardous for a different reason this particular time. Who knows, if there's weather like that, it may actually decide the protesters on a different course of action. We shall see what happens tomorrow, of course, and update you appropriately. Now, reports suggest that Rishi Sunak could be close to a major gas deal with the United States, with those talks at the COP27 climate summit in Egypt, of course, still going on. But this is a so-called energy security partnership, we're told, between the UK and the US. It could involve billions of cubic metres of liquefied natural gas being sold to Britain over the next year. It's hoped that it might help to keep the lights on this winter. Let's speak now to Natasha Fielding, editor of the daily European Gas Report at Argus Media. Natasha, thanks very much indeed for joining us. We assume this would be the product of fracking in the US, would it?
Yes, that's right. Any deal that is struck between the US and the UK would involve the shale gas that is exported, liquefied, and carried on tankers around the world.
Be scratching their heads thinking, well, you know, fracking obviously is now back in a moratorium here in the UK, and yet we're going to import that very product from the United States with all the expense of bringing it in ships over the Atlantic.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say here, what I think it's important to emphasise is that any political deal struck between the US and the UK, or indeed the EU, is unlikely to have that much of an effect on where the LNG goes. And in fact, a great deal of US LNG has already been coming to the UK and the EU. And that's because prices have been so high in Europe that it makes more sense economically for exporters to target European markets. So the UK has already been receiving a great deal of US LNG that comes from fracking.
But that was my point, really. Is why on earth would you buy expensive gas from across the United States when, of course, it might be available here in the UK, despite, obviously, all the issues about planning regulations and so on?
Yeah, so really, Europe as a whole has wanted as much piped gas and liquefied gas as it could get its hands on in order to
prevent a lot of women having to undergo surgery and mastectomies as well?
That's correct. So my experience was that the drug shrunk my tumour very quickly, and I was able to have a lumpectomy, which is a much less invasive surgery. So I managed to keep my breast rather than having a mastectomy.
Now, it looks as if the NHS has signed the cheque, if you like, for this. And clearly, given the constrictions on the NHS at the moment with various spending and financial problems, this will pay for itself, do we think?
I can't really comment about that side of things because I'm not aware of the financials. But from what I've read in the release this morning, I think a pretty good deal has been struck between the drug company and the NHS to allow this treatment to be available quicker for more people.
Lawrence Surrey updating us, in remission for 5 years. Great news. Off to Las Vegas to celebrate, and why not? Now, let's just update you on the M25. It is running once more after those protests this morning, despite the torrential rain out there. But lots of you getting in touch with your thoughts on these protests. Roger, first of all, it's clear now that a bunch of people have elected themselves to run our country on their version of mob rule. In no way can this be allowed to continue, as it flies in the face of the law and democracy. If they feel so strongly about their views, then they should either join a democratic party, such as the Greens, or set up their own party and put their message out in a democratic way. Rod actually saying he'd missed a hospital appointment. I sat in my car on the M25 until way past my appointment time, while some young, misguided loser chose to delay thousands of motorists with their protests. My less moderate side, he says, would have gladly seen them dragged from the gantry by a couple of able truckers. He goes on to say, my message, though, would be to seek a sense of purpose with a proper job and protest through decent, respectful channels. I might just find the time to listen to you then. Wendy, rainforest destruction is as damaging to our environment as oil. Forests are an antidote to our pollution as well as preventing flooding. Perhaps the slogan should be, just stop rainforest destruction. Action could be taken on this now. Keep your views coming, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and of course we'll keep you updated on that. Also coming up, latest from the States on the US midterm elections, but what's that weather doing up on the M25 and elsewhere?
Hello again, Aidan McGivern here with the latest forecast from the Met Office. Further blustery showers coming and going through the rest of today, heavy with thunder in places, but some drier interludes, preferentially towards the east, because these showers are coming in from the Atlantic, they're coming in from the west, around the south of this area of low pressure that's sitting to the northwest of Scotland. And these lines, these occluded fronts, indicate some organisation to the showers, so they're coming through in lines, an hour or so of rain and gusty winds as the showers come through. Now, during the evening, the showers will become increasingly restricted to the south and the west, with a greater chance of drier interludes in the east, although there could still be 1 or 2 showers at times here. Temperatures in most places staying at around 8 to 11 Celsius, but in some sheltered spots, for example, northern England, northern Scotland, those temperatures dipping to the mid-single figures, where we get the greatest chance of some clear spells. And there will be some brightness first thing Wednesday, some sunshine, especially in the north and the east. Further showers, though, will be appearing, especially in the west, and these showers again will be heavy with gusty winds. But there'll be fewer of them compared with Tuesday, a better chance of some sunshine and lighter winds, but still fairly blustery. Temperatures of 15 Celsius in the south, I think 11 or 12 in the north. A change on the way for later Wednesday, however. The cloud thickens in the west and the northwest in particular. A breeze picks up coming from the southwest, and that will send some outbreaks of rain, mostly light and on and off, but some more persistent and heavy bursts for the north and west of Scotland. A mild night to come on Wednesday night, with temperatures by dawn on Thursday mostly in the double figures, but a lot of cloud around, especially in the west. And again, it's going to be damp over some western hills, with some more persistent rain in the northwest of Scotland. But all the while, it's turning drier and brighter in the southeast, and that's the trend for the rest of the week. It's going to turn drier in the southeast, unsettled in the northwest.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Welcome back. You're watching GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. Now, the US midterm elections are taking place. We're being told that Arizona, Colorado, Montana, Nebraska, New Mexico, Utah and Wyoming have just got going, opening the polls. Millions of Americans, of course, are heading to those polling booths there to cast their votes. It's held halfway through a president's four-year term, typically seen as a test of just how well or not, whoever in the White House is doing. Well, currently, the Democrats control both US chambers of Congress. That's the House of Representatives and the Senate, but their majority's slim. The Republicans only need 5 seats to take the House and just 1 to take the Senate. If that happens, President Biden would effectively have his hands tied for the next 2 years, with the Republicans able to block his laws. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, yes, he's back, it seems, has used his final rally to give his biggest hint yet he'll run for president again in 2024. Our political reporter Catherine Foster has the latest in the States.
The Democrats were optimistic just weeks ago. That has faded. Control of Congress is on a knife edge. Polls suggest the Democrats will lose their wafer-thin majority in the House of Representatives. The Senate is currently split 50-50. One more single seat would give Republicans control. Whoever resides in the White House usually loses ground in the midterms, and Biden will struggle to push through legislation without a majority in one or both houses. Voters are worried about inflation and recession. Republican Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, blames the Democrats.
We have the worst inflation that we've had in this country in 4 decades, and that didn't happen by accident. It happened because he came in and they printed and borrowed and spent trillions and trillions of dollars when they were warned if they did that, it would spark exactly the type of inflation that we've seen now.
President Joe Biden is warning the consequences of this vote will be profound.
We face one of those inflection points, one of those moments that not only comes around every 3, 4, 5 generations. We all know it in our bones that our democracy is at risk.
Previous Democrat presidents, including Barack Obama, are rallying around Biden with similar messages.
This habit we have of demonizing political opponents, of saying crazy stuff, it creates a dangerous climate.
Obama and Bill Clinton both did badly in their midterms but were re-elected. But President Biden is almost 80, and his approval ratings are dire. His Vice President, Kamala Harris, is unpopular too. And then there's this former president, Donald Trump, still claiming the last election was stolen.
I ran twice, I won twice, and I did much better the second time than I did the first. And now, in order to make our country successful, safe, and glorious, I will probably have to do it again, but stay tuned.
In 2022, the United States of America is anything but united. Catherine Forster, GB News.
Well, Paul's joining us now in the studio. He's been following the build-up. Paul, the polls are open and indications that voting is pretty heavy, that people are deciding to cast their votes early on.
Yeah, 40 million people, we already know, cast their votes early by ballot and in person. That is much higher than the 2018 midterm. So we know that a lot of the turnout is high, and we're expecting by the end of tomorrow, when we wake up, or in the morning rather this time, we expect that voter turnout will be higher, and that should give the Democrats some hope, but we're still expecting the Democrats to lose control of the House. That is where the smart money is.
Yeah.
And then the Senate, that's a toss-up at the moment. It's 50-50 in the Senate at the moment, and there are a third of those Senate seats up for grabs. Everyone in the House is up for grabs. We expect them to lose the House, which would, of course, make Joe Biden's agenda much more difficult.
Yeah, very difficult to get stuff through. And very divisive, of course, because of this man, Trump, and suggestions that many of the Republican candidates share this narrative that the election was stolen from them. How much effect will that have, do we think?
Political integrity, let's be honest, is not one of voters' big concerns. It is with the US media. They call it the big lie, but it is not a top voter concern. Voters' concerns are the economy. The
economy is stupid, as Clinton said,
Yeah, cost of living, abortion, immigration and crime. But definitely the economy is the big one out of those issues, not election integrity. But yeah, Donald Trump saying last night, or hinting strongly, that he's going to run again. This is what he had to say last night.
I ran twice, I won twice, and I did much better the second time than I did the first. Getting millions and millions more votes in 2020 than we got in 2016. And likewise, getting more votes than any sitting president in the history of our country by far. And now, in order to make our country successful, safe, and glorious, I will probably have to do it again, but stay tuned.
Just to remind people, Paul, this is not a presidential election. That's still another 2 years away.
But easy to understand why you get confused, right? We've seen former President Trump there. We've seen the Democrats wheeling out Barack Obama, who...
And Bill Clinton.
And Bill Clinton. And irrespective of what you think about them politically, they are good orators, especially Barack Obama, which in a way kind of highlights Joe Biden's shortcomings.
Yeah, and therein lies a very important question. You know, is this also partly a plebiscite on Biden, given the gaffes and given the fact that many in the media have commentated basically on him perhaps not being in full power of his faculties?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all midterm elections are effectively a plebiscite on the sitting president. Only one first-term president has ever retained control of the House. That was George Bush in 2001. Pretty much every other, in fact, since the Second World War, every president in their first term has lost control of the House. So it won't be a surprise if we wake up tomorrow morning and Joe Biden's lost control of the House. The question is, will they be able to hold on to the Senate? The implications for the rest of the world, for us here in the UK, Ukraine, how much will Congress vote to keep funding the war in Ukraine? Exactly, and supplying the arms. And also, how involved will they be with the changes that have to be made if the world is to limit warming when it comes to climate change? Of course, they're talking about it at the moment in Egypt. There'll be big implications for that.
And a gas deal, we understand, being done with the Biden administration. But let's remind ourselves what President Biden said.
Today, we face an inflection point, one of those moments that comes around every 3 or 4 generations. We know in our bones that our democracy is at risk, and we know that this is your moment to defend it, preserve it, protect it, choose it.
And that, of course, is the Democrats saying this is a vote about democracy, bearing in mind what the Trump supporters have been saying. And it is a very divided USA.
Yeah, it's a heavily divided USA. You've already alluded to it. This is kind of it almost looks like a warm-up for the 2024 presidential election. 300 of the Republican candidates are backed by Donald Trump. We imagine next Tuesday he will announce that he is going to run for president. There will, of course, be, all the way through next year, we'll have the primaries and the Republicans will choose who's going to represent them in that race. But one would have thought it's highly likely to be Donald Trump. He will want payback for that kind of loyalty, for backing those 300 candidates. That's more than half the Republican candidates at state and federal level. So,
make Trump great again.
Absolutely, and then we're just going to, so essentially we could see, in a couple of years' time, we'll have Biden against Trump again. Yeah. What does that say about American democracy, that you've got the same two people to pick from 4 years later?
Yeah, and no generational change as yet. But as we say, the polls are open. We'll get the early results in the early morning. All the analysis coming up here on GB News tomorrow. Also coming up here, politics here, complaints about Cabinet Minister Sir Gavin Williamson. What's he alleged to have been up to now? We'll be telling you. But first, let's get an update on the news headlines with Rosie.
Good afternoon, it's 2:33. Let's get you up to date. Rishi Sunak's considering raising state pensions and benefits in line with inflation. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor are also considering imposing up to £60 billion in tax rises and spending cuts in the autumn budget next week. Sir Gavin Williamson reportedly told a senior civil servant to slit your throat while he was the Defence Secretary. The Guardian's reporting that Sir Gavin made the remarks in front of colleagues in a meeting and on another occasion told them to jump out of the window. Sir Gavin denies the new claims. Boris Johnson has asked the MPs he's nominated for peerages to delay taking them so they don't trigger by-elections in their constituencies. Nadine Dorris and Alok Sharma are amongst those that the Times are reporting to have been given the honours. The Conservatives are currently behind the Labour Party in most official opinion polls. The government's understood to be nearing a deal with France over the Channel migrant crisis. The agreement could see British immigration officers stationed in French control rooms, allowing them to coordinate beach searches for boats being launched into the water. It's believed the deal is worth around £80 million. Downing Street, though, are playing down speculation, saying discussions are ongoing. 8 Just Stop Oil protesters have been charged with conspiracy to cause a public nuisance after they blocked several junctions of the M25 yesterday. Well, police were forced to halt traffic on the Dartford crossing today and other junctions for over an hour. The Dartford crossing has now been reopened. The Met Police deployed specialist removal teams to deal with the protesters, arresting today 16 of them. Leslie Phillips has died peacefully in his sleep, aged 98, according to his agent. The actor was made famous for starring in the Carry On films in the late 50s and early 60s. Later in his career, he featured as the voice of the Sorting Hat in the Harry Potter films. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. It's GB News. Mark will be back in a moment.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live with me, Mark Longhurst. Now, the row over Cabinet Minister Sir Gavin Williamson appears to be deepening, with further claims of bullying being levelled against him. He'd allegedly told a senior civil servant to slit your throat in what they claimed was a campaign of intimidation when he was Defence Secretary. Well, this morning, the Prime Minister chaired his first cabinet meeting, with Mr Williamson thought to be attending. And yesterday, Rishi Sunak met French President Emmanuel Macron, with Number 10 saying talks on a deal with France over migrant boats were in their final stages. Let's speak now to our political correspondent Tom Harwood in Downing Street to catch up on the latest with all this. And Tom, first to the Williamson affair. We were told that it all was being referred to the Tory party in terms of this issue with the Chief Whip. Now we're being told it's also going to the parliamentary watchdog on bullying.
Yes, and this would imply that one of the individuals who seem to think of themselves as being bullied has submitted a formal complaint. That is the way in which these processes work. But ultimately, the fact that there are formal proceedings taking place with regard to exploring the level at which bullying took place, if indeed it took place at all, the fact that there are investigations to some extent gives cover to the Prime Minister, because what we've seen for the last 48 hours or so is the line out of Downing Street has been consistent. That because there is an independent investigation going on, it would be inappropriate for the Prime Minister to comment any further on this matter or to prejudge the outcome of these investigations. So to some extent, yes, it's bad for Gavin Williamson that indeed there are investigations of his conduct being undertaken. However, on the other side of the coin, that does give the Prime Minister space, or at least that's the view of Number 10, that whilst these investigations are going on, the Prime Minister can say that he won't comment. However, of course, the longer this is dragged on, the more is coming out, and that ultimately may well be what does for Gavin Williamson. If the story doesn't move on, if the lobby doesn't sort of seize on a new target, if there isn't something else that takes the sort of fickle gaze of journalists in Westminster, doesn't sort of move their gaze on, then more will be coming out about Gavin Williamson, because of course he has been at the centre of politics for a very long time. He was working in a unit for David Cameron before he became Chief Whip under Theresa May, and then Defence Secretary, and then Education Secretary. This is a man who's been integral to the running of governance for a very long time.
With, of course, his pet tarantula. Anyway, talking about little local difficulty and fickle issues, Suella Braverman, of course, is the other problem that he's had to deal with. Interesting, of course, that it's the Prime Minister himself who spoke to President Macron in Egypt about this issue of the migrant boats, and basically the indication that there may be some deal in the offing.
Yes, it does seem that a deal is very close. Now, what would this mean? This would mean more intense cooperation between the British and the French, but also, frankly, it would mean British money being sent across to the French to enable that cooperation. Now, it must be said that a deal was getting close in the early stages of the summer, and many people are suggesting that that deal was sort of put on ice, was held off as a result of Liz Truss's less than warm words towards Emmanuel Macron, refusing to answer if she thought the French president was a friend or a foe. Well, it was very pertinent that yesterday, in Rishi Sunak's tweet celebrating his first meeting as Prime Minister with Emmanuel Macron, the very first word in that tweet was friend. Rishi Sunak really trying to emphasise the partnership between himself individually and Emmanuel Macron, and perhaps that is the basis for a deal.
OK, we shall see. But, Tom, we'll let you get back in the dry. Thanks for updating us there in Downing Street. Umbrellas very much to the fore today. Thanks very much indeed. Let's hope it's not raining in Birmingham, because today is Birmingham's Poppy Day, the fundraising collection day in aid of the Poppy appeal for the Royal British Legion. Well, Jack Carson is there following events for us. And, Jack, good to see you in the dry there. You were obviously updating us at the National Arboretum yesterday with a field of remembrance. This is a slightly different occasion today in the city centre there.
Well, as you mentioned, Rain Mark, there's a few dark clouds starting to appear over me, so hopefully we hold off for a few more minutes. But yes, it is Birmingham Poppy Day here in Birmingham, and it's been a real bit of a celebration here today. We've had the Royal Marines Band, we've had a vintage singer singing some wartime songs, so it's been a bit of a party atmosphere here at New Street Station. But I'm joined now by Lieutenant Colonel Samantha Brettle, who's been here as part of the Poppy appeal today. Tell me a little bit about the work that you've been doing today.
Oh, today we've come along from HQ West Midlands, so we're the Army in the West Midlands. And I brought along a sort of selection of our troops, mainly my team and a few others. We've got reservists, we've got regulars, and they've all come along, and basically we've been all throughout Birmingham collecting money and really engaging with the local population, which is really important. Birmingham is an amazing city with amazing people, and their generosity has been, again, this year, fantastic.
And you mentioned to me earlier, it's about making a connection with people. It's not just about remembering it this time, it's about making that connection with people and kind of talking about what the army and what all the forces do at this time.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we remain society connected, and this is a great way of doing it because it's something that everybody understands, and the poppy is a great symbol, obviously, for remembrance. But for us, it's about coming and talking to the local population, saying thank you for what they've done and the support they give us, and being out and being seen in uniform when we've been wearing this, and you've seen people wearing number 2 uniform. We've also got the RAF as well wearing their blue uniform, and we've had a few Navy as well. So they come and talk to us, and we can sort of tell them what we do and how we do it. So it's remaining in the public eye. If we don't, we become invisible and irrelevant, and we're not irrelevant. We still do a huge amount of work behind the scenes that maybe a lot of people don't see.
And that links to remembrance and why remembrance is so important this time as well.
Absolutely. There's a lot of things that go on that people don't need to know about, but we're there, and it's supporting the nation's sort of gratitude to fallen soldiers, not only the soldiers, their families, the widows, people who have lost somebody. It's really important that we keep that memorial going, and also for veterans and for those serving personnel now who may well then have faced difficulties later on in life. So it's we've got to keep it going. We've got to keep that. We've got to remain part of society, because we are part of society, and we go back into society as well.
And everyone has their own personal story of remembrance. What's yours?
Oh, for me, I've unfortunately been a notifying officer on a number of occasions where I've had to go and tell a family that one of their loved ones is not coming back for whatever reason. It's quite traumatic, more so for the family. But it's my time then of just reflecting on what we've had to do and how we do it. But also it's a celebration of what we do as part of the bigger organisation, of being part of the forces, which is really important to us.
And the British Legion at this time are not obviously helping veterans, but current serving personnel who, in a time when everyone's struggling with the costs of living, they are also getting support from the British Legion there as well.
Oh, absolutely. So veterans and their families and their spouses will get support. So once you've joined the club, which is any of the forces, if you've served, I think it's either a week or a day. I think it's a day for the Royal British Legion. You will get support whenever you find yourself in difficulty if you find yourself in difficulty during your lifetime, and the support is continuous, absolutely.
And before you joined, and now that you are a member of the Army, how does remembrance change?
Oh, I don't think it does change. As a girl, many moons ago, yeah, I used to go along as a member of Brownie's Girl Guides and on all that. But now, obviously it's more personal because I am part of the organisation that is being remembered. So, yeah, I think it's something that we need to do. It's very sad, but also it's still a celebration of what we're good at doing and the freedoms that we get because of other people who laid their lives down, which is really important as well, and will continue to do so.
Thank you so much for joining me and talking to me. Here at Birmingham Poppy Day, volunteers, servicemen and women selling poppies to raise money for the British Legion to continue the great work that they do.
Yeah, Jack, thank you to both of you for underlining the importance of the armed services and, of course, the act of remembrance as well. Thanks very much indeed. Now, let's go from Birmingham to Bradford. And the King cheered earlier today at the beginning of his two-day visit to Yorkshire by Morrison's supermarket workers, their HQ up there. He'd wished them an early, happy Christmas. Well, he was touring the Bradford headquarters as hundreds of staff watched from balconies and stairwells. King Charles in Yorkshire to congratulate the UK's newest city, meeting many people outside the Civic Centre there. Let's go live now to join our Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley, who's actually at Bradford City Hall. And Anna, many young people, we understand, able to greet the King there as well.
Good afternoon. Yes, there must have been 30 or 40 more young people here at the City Hall who met the Queen, and thousands outside that were cheering him on. I'm joined by Safia. She is the first hijabi boxer. Safia, just tell us a little bit about why you were picked to see the King today and what it was like.
A lot of us were picked because of the work that we do with the community and who we are and how we represent Bradford. Yeah, we're honoured to be here today. We all deserve to be here. Every single person in this room we all deserve to be here. I see all the work that everyone does for the community, and it's nice to have Bradford on top for once. I feel like we're always at the bottom of the list, so for once we're at the top, and what an amazing experience, what an honour.
Be at the top again, City of Culture 2025 coming up. But just tell me a little bit about what you do.
I'm a boxer. My journey started in Bradford. I'll always, no matter where I am in the world, everyone sees me everywhere, but I'll always give back here. My roots are here, my mum lives here. My boxing started here, the love for the sport, so got so much love for it, for the place.
And the first hijabi boxer, what does that mean?
Oh, yeah. Saying that out loud like so many times, it's just amazing to be the first Asian female to do it. What a journey so far. I'm nowhere near where I want to be yet, but the past couple of years has been an amazing experience, and I'm just so blessed to be here.
And you're 22, but you started boxing at 18. And what was it like seeing the King? You know, what did he say to you? Did he speak to you? What was it like?
Do you know what? I was just expecting him to shake my hand and just say hello and just go on to the next person and speak to somebody else. But he stopped. He said hello. I just introduced myself, and Kex in England, who was with us, she just said, "Oh, she's a hijabi boxer," and he was like, "Oh yeah, I know who she is." Like he already had a bit of a background, and he knew who some of us were, and which was amazing because I didn't like the King knows who you are, and he also just asked a few questions about my boxing and how it's been, and we made a funny joke about my face getting ruined through the sport, and my nose, and I said probably on my features and everything. I just said boxing will probably fix them, and we just had a bit of a giggle about it. But honestly, so humble, so nice, absolutely amazing experience.
Lots of banter with the King. And what was the atmosphere like?
Oh, it was lovely in here, so inspiring. Honestly, I've been here so many times, and every time I leave, I just feel so blessed. Every time I come, you just see so many people, your network, the people you're surrounded by. Honestly, my 18-year-old self wouldn't believe where I am today. Honestly, starting from my journey from long-term illness and being down at the lowest of my life to being in rooms with the King and the top people in Bradford, so I'm really blessed.
And what was it like to be honoured like that?
Oh, great, amazing feeling. I can't wait to tell my mum. But yeah, very lucky, and it's I wouldn't be here without everyone around me. You know, like, the support system I have is great, and I feel like that's so important. To my coaches, to the people around me, all the boys in the gym, because I'm the only girl at the gym. So shout out to all of them. Shout out to my manager, Chris, everyone. Wouldn't be here without you.
I'm sure your mum will be very proud. And what's the sport done for you, and where do you want to go next with it?
Oh, the sport has completely changed my life, physically, mentally, spiritually. Absolutely amazing. I'm not the same girl I was when I used to live here as well, even though I'm a bit all over right now. It's just, I'm so excited for the future. I want to go all the way with the sport. I don't want to stand here and say I want to win this and do this when I want to tick all the boxes that I've got in mind, and I'll do that with all the amazing people around me. I hope my mum is proud of me, so shout out to mum.
She certainly will be. He's so humble. And I think our presenter Mark has just got a question for you as well, so I'll just hand over to him.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on how important these visits are with a new king, and obviously marking the fact that it's a new city and such a wonderful multicultural centre as well.
Definitely, yeah. You just touched on how great it is for Bradford, didn't you? It's a multicultural city, and what's it done for the city having the king here?
Oh, it's absolutely amazing. Like I mentioned earlier, we deserve to be on top for once. I feel like everybody in this room works so hard for the community in their own field, whether it is sport, whether it is in their own fields. We're always working so hard, and I've seen it for so many years. I did a Bradford leadership programme as well a couple of years ago, and I did a lot of work here. I did a lot of work in Parliament, Home Office, Downing Street, where I visited, and I've seen all the leaders working so hard. So for Bradford, it's amazing. It's nice for us to be on top. So well done to us all.
Yeah,
definitely. Well done to Bradford, and well done to you. Thank you, Safia.
Yeah. And just to update us, Anna, we've got York and Doncaster tomorrow, I think. It's a 2-day visit, isn't it? And with the Queen Consort as well tomorrow.
That's it, yes. So the King is in Leeds at the moment. He's at Leeds Building Society, and then tomorrow on to York. He's going for a service in the Minster, and then he's going on to Doncaster, which was given city status in June for the Queen's Jubilee. So he's making it officially a city. So lots of people will be happy to see him in York and in Doncaster tomorrow.
But even happier to see him in Bradford, as we just learned. So thanks to both of you, and wonderful to hear the stories there in Bradford City Centre. Thank you very much indeed. Now, let's just reflect on some sad news that we brought you today. The actor Leslie Phillips dying peacefully in his sleep at the age of 98, that being revealed to us by his agent a little earlier. The actor, of course, made famous for those carry-on films in the late 50s and early 60s, and then later in his career featuring as the voice of the Sorting Hat, you remember, in the Harry Potter films. But his wife paying tribute to him, basically saying that he was a wonderful husband and the public has lost a truly great showman. Quite simply, a national treasure. People loved him. He was mobbed wherever he went. And, of course, reflecting on his famous catchphrase, ding dong. What a way to remember. Let's just remember what you've been telling us with your thoughts today. On that gas deal, Andrew's been telling us, why are we going to the US for gas when every terminal and platform across the UK are burning gas off at ridiculous rates? James saying, with talk about power cuts, one of my worries is to do with my freezers. Who's going to pay for the food that's defrosted? The government or the insurance? Or do I just have to replace everything ourselves? Good question. We'll leave it hanging in the air. Thanks for all your views. Stay with us here on GB News. We're back with all the latest for you tomorrow. Patrick Christus coming up next with all to keep you entertained. Weather for you now.
Hello again, Aidan McGivern here with the latest forecast from the Met Office. Further blustery showers coming and going through the rest of today. Heavy with thunder in places, but some drier interludes, preferentially towards the east, because these showers are coming in from the Atlantic, they're coming in from the west, around the south of this area of low pressure that's sitting to the northwest of Scotland. And these lines, these occluded fronts, indicate some organisation to the showers, so they're coming through in lines, an hour or so of rain and gusty winds as the showers come through. Now, during the evening, the showers will become increasingly restricted to the south and the west, with a greater chance of drier interludes in the east, although there could still be 1 or 2 showers at times here. Temperatures in most places staying at around 8 to 11 Celsius, but in some sheltered spots, for example, northern England, northern Scotland, those temperatures dipping to the mid-single figures, where we get the greatest chance of some clear spells. And there will be some brightness first thing Wednesday, some sunshine, especially in the north and the east. Further showers, though, will be appearing, especially in the west, and these showers again will be heavy with gusty winds. But there'll be fewer of them compared with Tuesday, a better chance of some sunshine, and lighter winds, but still fairly blustery. Temperatures of 15 Celsius in the south, I think 11 or 12 in the north. A change on the way for later Wednesday, however. The cloud thickens in the west and the northwest in particular. A breeze picks up coming from the southwest, and that will send some outbreaks of rain, mostly light and on and off, but some more persistent and heavy bursts for the north and west of Scotland. A mild night to come on Wednesday night, with temperatures by dawn on Thursday mostly in the double figures, but a lot of cloud around, especially in the west. And again, it's going to be damp over some western hills, with some more persistent rain in the northwest of Scotland. But all the while, it's turning drier and brighter in the southeast, and that's the trend for the rest of the week. It's going to turn drier in the southeast, unsettled in the northwest.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got